Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Today, we are joined by Dr. Amy Ramsey in the Department of Pharmacology at the University of Toronto and a postdoc student in Ruth Ross's lab, her previous student, Catharine Mielnik. And today, we're just going to ask some questions related to their most recent publication. So what was your research about?
This research was about the question of whether we can recover brain function in a brain where NMDA receptors are not working properly. So NMDA receptors, we know they're important in the developing brain, but also throughout life, NMDA receptors are important. And we didn't know whether the problems that we see when NMDA receptors are dysfunctional, whether this was due to developmental deficiencies or whether it was just because the NMDA receptors weren't working at that moment. And so in this paper, what we tried to do was restore NMDA receptors in a brain where NMDA receptors were not working properly. And then ask, whether this repaired the cognitive and different behavioral outcomes in the mice.
Great, thank you for that. So, Kasha, what did you find?
Well, we found that what classically the scientific community or the medical community thought that the adult brain was this static, non-changing kind of wired structure is actually quite malleable and quite plastic. And we were able to recover a lot of this brain function well into adulthood and even in adolescence and earlier. So it really kind of showed that these critical periods that previously were thought to be quite rigid were no longer the case. And we were able to actually recover this behavioral function as well as at the synapse level. We were able to see that into adulthood, which was quite exciting because it kind of opens the window for therapeutics, which previously we thought was much more narrow. It's actually quite wide.
That's super exciting. So Amy, what do you think this research means for GRIN disorder patients?
Well, I think there's a lot of implications. First, I think this should provide a lot of hope in the sense that there are a lot of really high level thinking, the parts of the brain that are involved in social interactions, the parts of the brain that are involved in memory and learning and problem solving, those parts of the brain really can recover. So for GRIN patients who have problems with learning and memory, who have problems with social interactions, those seem to be pretty plastic or malleable, as Catherine said. So I think there's a lot of hope there, but this needs to be tempered with the understanding that we did this in mice, and mice are really different from humans. So there's first of all, a mouse brain is not the same as a human brain, and we don't know yet what that will be for humans. But also, this was not gene therapy the way that we talk about gene therapy for humans. So just because we were able to do this with the mice doesn't mean that the technology is already solved for doing it in humans, because there are a lot of challenges for actually applying this to humans that we haven't solved those problems yet. I think that we're going to solve them, but right now, those technologies just don't exist and they're not safe right now. But once we figure them out, I truly believe that we're going to see dramatic improvements. And in the meantime, we could, in theory, get the same level of recovery if we find the just right drug. Right now, we don't have the just right drug that would restore NMDA receptor function. But we're testing, we're using mice, we're using lots of different model systems to try and test those drugs. So I think there's a lot of reason to be hopeful in the short term for finding a drug, and then in the long term for finding a gene therapy based mechanism that could provide a lasting improvement.
And I think that, as Amy said, it kind of lets, I think maybe the parents breathe a little bit, that they're not running against the clock of a window that's closing. And even that, I think, or I hope, it at least kind of not tempers anxieties, but just maybe allows them to have this hope that there isn't a window that's closing and there isn't a time frame that they're going to miss if they don't get it right away. And it does allow for more testing, more optimization, more validation, all these kind of things that will ultimately make it safe for their children to then try and recover some of these brain functions. So I think it's, I mean, I'd hope that it's adding more hope to this whole kind of horrible situation that they're put in.
Yeah, I agree. Great point.
Terrific. Thank you both so much for your time. We really appreciate the opportunity to learn more about this work. And thank you for all that you're doing for our GRIN families and helping us to learn more every day and reassure them. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Megan.
Thank you.